Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Matt Kep here with another article concerning Zack Snyder's recent comments on Joss Whedon's Justice League. This is an article from News AV Club by William Hughes. This was debuted about, let me refresh here. This was published about 2 hours ago at least. And so this here is pretty much going to cover Zack Snyder's recent comments he made on Justice League, the filmmaker behind most of the DC Universe's entry movies. And I think it's time to go down the rabbit hole, which is the long history of Zack Snyder. So, Zack Snyder has done his work with music videos, and he broke out in the mainstream with 2004's Dawn of the Dead, the horror remake of the George A. Romero classic. This was a well-received film and a box office hit, a good start to Zack Snyder's career, and then it followed up with the comic book adaptation or graphic novel Watchmen, 300, excuse me. It followed up with 300, got slightly less positive word of mouth, but this was still a film that was carried out by audience favoritism and word of mouth, and this proved to be a much more successful hit than Dawn of the Dead, and it seemed like Zack Snyder was heading to a very promising career indeed. But then came Watchmen, the comic book graphic novel adaptation of Frank Miller's story, the constructionist piece, which was then adapted by Zack Snyder in 2009. This had same critical appraisal as 300, though this had mixed word of mouth with audiences. And word of mouth did not carry this movie out. This movie had a steeper turnout than his two other films. Remains a box office failure, though it has garnered a cult following. Though it did remain one of those divided pieces. Some people love it, some people hate it in terms of superhero comic book media. Which will then be the start of Zack Snyder's descent in his career. So then we had Legends of the Guardians, Hours of Ga'Hoole. Very mixed and negative word of mouth on this movie. It was a modest disappointment, but not a good turnout for Zack Snyder. And then we had the answer to Zack Snyder's call for female empowerment, Sucker Punch. This was a film that was critically panned and was a colossal box office failure, didn't even break even, or even made slightly higher than this budget. This film is definitely the most despised out of Zack Snyder's filmography. But then came wrapping up the Chris Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. Zack Snyder would be hired to helm a reboot to bring Superman back into the cultural zeitgeist again and film culture with Man of Steel. So produced by Christopher Nolan and directed by Zack Snyder and written by David S. Goyer. The film came out in 2013, and despite a promising opening of $160 million, boasted from its high anticipation and great use of marketing behind it. The film had much mixed to negative word of mouth. This movie did not carry out its theatrical run. So with a $225 million budget, the film came down to a total of $668 million worldwide, which is not a great sign in terms of the break-even point, considering the amount of money that was spent to make this movie and how Zack handled it. So then, people were complaining about a darker Superman, so Warner Brothers' call to that would be Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which came out 3 years after Man of Steel. And with Batman brought into the fold, this film did have a significantly promising opening, very strong opening weekend debut of $166 million, but then the film got much worse word of mouth, and the film has steeper drops. And given its $250 to $300 million budget, The film grossed $873 million. Now, for both films, Warner Bros. Were aiming for more billion-dollar hits, and these are very staggering, disappointing numbers. And with Justice League, Zack Snyder had shot most of Justice League already, so studio mandates were made to make Justice League a more upbeat, a much more fun, poppy comic book piece of entertainment. And so, with the tragedy of Zack Snyder's daughter, who had committed suicide, Joss Whedon was brought on board to helm the reshoots as well as the post-production stage for Justice League. And therefore, with Justice League, you had, which had released in 2017 under Whedon's direction. The film had a budget of $300 million, and it had a very abysmal opening below $100 million compared to the other two DC films, and the film grossed $657 million worldwide against a $300 million budget. So that's Man of Steel numbers, and that's even worse than the numbers turned out for Man of Steel. So we're going to break down this article because recently it has been announced that Warner Brothers would release the Snyder Cut with Zack Snyder's complete vision for Justice League. That's going to be requiring an additional $35 million budget to get the film finalized and out there on HBO Max, which is a new streaming service, to get it out there in the public. So we're going to break down this article and definitely read over this entire page to break down some points that will come up. So, with coronavirus still going at large and a lot of venues and events closed down, especially conventions, Comic-Con at Home would be the upcoming virtual convention that will engage fans and internet users on a mainstream scale for any news for popular pop culture media that would come out. But anyways, Comic-Con at Home might be the big news in online conventions today, but it's definitely not the most aggressively bridge-burning Justice Con. By and for people who had somehow built large chunks of identity out of the Snyder Cut of Warner Brothers' Justice League. It's also running this afternoon, operating with a much more renegade, say whatever you want sort of vibe that extends especially to the online con's biggest guest, Zack Snyder himself. He mints very few words about his feelings on any other Justice League movies you might have seen in theaters over the last few years compared to the upcoming release of his version on HBO Max. Now, this is a weird sentence here. Who mints very few words about his feelings on any other Justice League movies. So is Zack implying that, fans would have seen any other Justice League, which there has been only the one Justice League movie, co-directed by Zack Snyder, and then Joss Whedon taking over. So, and that movie's a colossal failure. So you wouldn't expect the Justice League 2 or 3 at any future. So that's pretty odd. In an hour-long conversation, Snyder pulled 0 punches, including noting that there is no fucking way you'll be seeing anything Joss Whedon shot showing up in this film. Obviously. Okay, Zack, this is the big wish that's getting fulfilled. We're talking about the Snyder Cut with your name as the auteur. So this is going to be the film that is going to have your vision that you set out for since inception. So of course, this is going to be the version that's not going to feature anything Whedon related or Whedon influence. I would destroy the film. So this is where Zack Snyder goes into full George Lucas Star Wars Holiday Special territory. I would destroy the film. I would set it on fire before I would use a single frame that I did not photograph. He asserted when the topic was brought up between that and Ray Fisher standing in an earlier panel that every single one of those words, every single one of those comments that he made about Whedon's abusive on-set behavior is true. It really wasn't a great day for Joss Whedon's public reputation. So we already have an article here that's popping out. Ray Fisher calling out for Whedon's behavior being gross, abusive, and unprofessional. Now, there is a context to this. Whedon was brought on board under horrible circumstances. The film had a skyrocketed budget. Zack Snyder had left, having already shot the film. The film was already a production mess, with very little time to get the post-production work out, special effects, sound design, photography, composited well to be projected to theaters. So I do recall in a review, a very lengthy review from Ralph Filmmaker, from what I gather, that Whedon's handling of Justice League improved some things with Ray Fisher's character, Cyborg, who in earlier takes, Ray Fisher's performance was terrible regarding some line deliveries and performance inflections that were made to get the character working. And so Whedon coming on board to reshoot some of those scenes was supposedly had supposedly improved Ray Fisher's performance with his takes, and he chose those for the actual film. That is a hard fucking fact. Well, to clarify, it seems like Ray Fisher, with support to Zack Snyder, seems to be throwing Whedon under the bus, considering that the real version of Justice League will be out soon. That is a hard fucking fact, Snyder added. I literally would blow that thing up if I thought for a second. He then trailed off before continuing. Anything you see in this film that reminds you of the theatrical release, which again, famously, I literally have never seen, would be because that was the thing I had done and was being borrowed for whatever that Frankenstein's monster you got in the theater. So yeah, not a fan. So I guess Snyder is referring to the footage that they use out of his version of Justice League that was mixed with the Joss Whedon cut. So you had stylistically and aesthetically two different visual directions for Justice League, being the more dark, nightly lit, very muted Zack Snyder approach compared to the horribly saturated but offbeat comical tone of Whedon's that led to pretty much the film being a colossal disaster. On very slight, less contentious notes, Snyder had also talked about dealing with studio's insistence on cutting the movie down to a shorter size. He doesn't see why they needed to. Okay, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, both films that he directed were 2.5 hour movies. And this came to attention with Batman v Superman, a film that they had to re-release with a much longer cut because the initial theatrical cut is a structural and incoherent mess. A lot of scenes, mostly composed of a lot of scenes that did not relate to each other, that could be interchangeable at any point, and the film would still function the same in terms of pacing. And a lot of things were unexplained, so therefore they had like the Ultimate Edition. And with that being said, there is a reason why the studio wanted to cut down on the running time for Justice League, because they were appeasing too much of Snyder's ego by making these very overlong contemplative epics of these two superhero characters that in his portrayal were just dumb as a wall of bricks. In terms of like financial turnouts, you want to cut the movie down to a shorter running time to fit more showtimes in theaters. So even though Man of Steel and Batman v Superman took over a lot of theater spaces for every cinema that's been put out there, it still meant very few showtimes considering how lengthy the movies were. But it wouldn't really work either way considering that it was all due to word of mouth. The films were badly received, and word of mouth prevented from being much more bigger hits than the turnouts in profits that they received. His desire to put Superman in a much darker suit, which the studio followed on. Okay. Now, this has actually been trending recently. There was the black suit issue with Superman. Now, Zack Snyder's take on Superman was taking this optimistic and, according to Snyder's words, a very Boy Scout superhero that was a hero to everybody and a hero to the everyman that we can all relate to. And he turned Superman and Clark Kent into this very dour, nihilistic, morally ambiguous, fallible, very broken shell of how people would perceive Superman. So again, after 2 movies, the studios were resistant on the idea of a darker Superman, so they wanted to mandate to make Superman into pretty much the more optimistic, upbeat, heroic character that fans demanded. And the notes, he got to make the movie funnier, which he absolutely disagreed with. So, according to Zack Snyder's philosophy, fun is definitely the issue when it comes to his comic movies. So, with characters like Batman, Superman, and even some screen time with Wonder Woman, these movies cannot be fun. They have to be very dark, serious, ultra realistic, and morally complex and ambiguous to the point of high pretentiousness. He also showed off a very short clip from his version, viewable at... Okay, I'm assuming this is like a timestamp from the panel video above here, so you're welcome to look up that. Showing Superman meeting Jeremy Irons wearing said far more dour take of the traditional blue, golds, and reds. Now, far more dour take. Now that it's been up there on Twitter trending, the suit was going to be full-on black. It was a more nightly color like take of the Superman suit, which the studio made the right call to not include in Justice League because they wanted to make Superman back. They wanted to put Superman back as the optimistic hero character, along with promises of more real footage and news about the project's official length and title at DC's Fandom event next month. So yeah, just to wrap up this article in a short summary, this is pretty much Zack Snyder's ego just running his mouth again. Concerning that Zack Snyder's ego was pretty much just the start of the failure with handling DC, especially with Man of Steel. I think from inception, I think Zack Snyder, based on what we've seen of his filmography with DC, was a very bad choice to handle DC, to handle the brand, and bringing these characters into the mainstream, which were these representations of just dark, morally complex characters, but he made them morally gray, therefore one-dimensional, which is pretty much like this weird postmodern angle that we're all led to because of Zack Snyder's approach with his storytelling. And so he's just bashing Whedon out of his own, pretty much just out of his own narcissism. Even though, DC was doomed as soon as Zack Snyder was brought on board in the first place. Same deal with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers had chosen the wrong person, and therefore they lost money because of the turnouts that definitely reduce with each film that come out of Snyder. And it just goes to show that since Snyder had left, we have Wonder Woman and Aquaman, 2 real successes, I will call, compared to Snyder's output. And it seems that with Birds of Prey and just following up with Suicide Squad when Snyder was on board, it seems like the DC Universe is in shambles. I don't think they're planning to do any more cross-universe projects. they're solely going to be focusing on making a franchise with Aquaman and with Wonder Woman, with Gal Gadot's story. But that's pretty much all I have to say. Tell me what you guys think. Like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for tuning in to Madcap Productions. And you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. And you're welcome to sub me on YouTube. And thank you again for watching. And, thank you again for watching. And goodbye.